Welcome to the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Tremblett, and I'm a firm believer that even when life doesn't go as planned, it is taking you exactly where you're meant to be. On this podcast, I'm here to help you finally release control of what you think you want and begin to just trust in the ebbs and flows of life. Each week, I will show you how to build that positive mindset, radiate with self-confidence, and cultivate an unshakable resilience. Let me prove to you that even when life ebbs, you will glow. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 90 of the Ebb and Glow podcast. Today's episode is with one of my good friends, Rachel Anderson, and today's episode is all about the pressures of being a people pleaser, the pressures of social media, and how the internet can just be sometimes mean and how difficult it can be to grow a following on social media when it's constantly changing. And we also talk about some past trauma and the importance of going to therapy to start peeling back the layers of all of that trauma. As I said, Rachel is one of my good girlfriends, and we recorded this episode on Zoom because I still really need to figure out how to record in person. If you didn't know already, I have never recorded an episode in person with a guest before. It's always via Zoom because I started this podcast during the pandemic where we weren't allowed to be next to anyone. And it was such a nice way to still build a connection when we weren't allowed to see people or be around them. So I just got used to recording on Zoom, and that's just what I've always done. So I'm excited. Eventually, I'll probably start doing it in person with people I do interviews with in Toronto. But yeah, it's funny. Rachel, literally, I can see her building from where I'm sitting, and it's funny. We still did it on Zoom. And what's even more funny, if you're watching this episode on YouTube, you can probably gather that Rachel and I look very similar in this video. We are wearing the exact same thing, and we had our hair done the same way. So it was funny coming on video and starting the recording, and I was like, oh, we look the same today. This is so funny, but it was cute. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. This podcast is all about interviewing everyday people on honestly life's ups and downs. And what I love about doing this podcast is we talk about a lot of heavy topics sometimes, but we also talk about the ebbs and flows that we happen in everyday life. So, for example, with this conversation with Rachel, we talk about some heavier things with like past trauma and relationship trauma and how she's had to go through years of therapy to kind of comb through those kind of things. But we also talk about like this week, for example, she was feeling very unmotivated when we recorded this episode. And because Rachel is a content creator and YouTuber, her life always looks really great because she's obviously filming when she's in a good mood. The aesthetic is always really pretty, but in this conversation with her, it's proof that no matter how perfect someone's life looks like on the internet, there's still some stuff going on. They're still everyday people. And like Rachel said at the beginning of this conversation, she was having like a down week when we recorded. And that's the way life goes. You're going to have these constant ups and downs and waves, and it's never smooth sailing, as I always say. A couple other topics we talk about in this episode is we talk a lot about just social media and how it's constantly changing and how you have to adapt and keep up with the trends. We talk about being vulnerable online and pivoting as well and understanding what your audience wants from you and then realizing that, oh, they just want me to be me, and that's probably the content that's going to perform the best. We talk about relationships and mindset, and we get really heavy into the topic of being okay with the gray and the unknown. Both Rachel and I have lived a lot of our lives kind of seeing everything as black and white. When we break up with someone, like, it's done. That's how we always used to look at it, but I find as we all get older, we're a little bit more open to the gray. So we talk a bit about that. And we also talk about people's entitlement on the internet, having different opinions on people. And towards the end, we talk about signs from the universe and major changes in your life. So before we jump into it, let's give you a little bit of info into who Rachel is. So Rachel is an Australian content creator who is currently residing in Toronto, Canada. Rachel has been on YouTube for over 10 years and has amassed over 59 million views. The focus of her content is home decor and style, as well as self-organization and motivation. So I will put all of Rachel's channels and social media links in the show notes, so please check her out. She also recently launched a stationery company where she does digital and printed planners. So check those out because they are fantastic. If you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Either DM me that you're loving this podcast. It's such great motivation and affirmation to keep continuing to grow the podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, just comment below and tell me what you loved about this episode today. So without further ado, let's jump into it and enjoy. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I know. And it's funny because I'm going to ask you about like updates that are happening recently, but I feel like I don't even know them. So it's actually going to be news to me because I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. So
I know.
Literally whatever you tell me right now is going to be genuinely news to me as well as all of the audience.
I love it. I love it.
So the first question I want to ask you that I ask everyone is where in your life lately have you had an ebb or some kind of setback or things just aren't working out too well?
Can I say like yesterday and today?
Oh, trust me.
Like
I
just
give me something that happened this morning if you want to be that recent. But
no, I'm just
recently.
so like low motivation the last 2 days. And I was really looking forward to this week. And I was like, I had a big list of stuff I wanted to do and I was really excited about it. And then it started Monday yesterday. And I was like, I'm really glad it's a holiday in the States because I feel like I can do less today. And it's kind of bugging me, but I'm just trying to take it in my stride and not like get too overwhelmed. I wrote a great to-do list this morning and I'm like, whatever I can get done, I can get done. So just a little demotivated. Maybe it's the weather. I don't know.
I was going to ask, do you find sometimes the weather affects you? Because Toronto today, it's a really rainy, gray day. And sometimes it can make people actually want to work more because they're like, I don't feel like I'm missing anything out there. But other times it can drain people's energy and you don't want to accomplish anything.
Yeah, I tend to feel a little more drained on the cloudy days. I was really good yesterday morning while it was sunny. I got up early, did all my things that I wanted to do. And then as it progressively got cloudier throughout the day, my motivation just kind of went down. So I'm hoping that tomorrow is maybe a bit better. But I also actually don't really have an idea of what this week looks like. And when I don't have anything planned in, I tend to not have anything to work towards. So that's also probably contributing to it. But it's just such a contrast to where I've been the last few weeks, where I've been super motivated and doing lots of things and just showing up every day. So it's all right. I'll get through it. It'll come back.
I found I had a similar day as yesterday as what you're talking about. And I found that I actually took a couple of days off this past weekend. And at one point, when I take a couple of days off from my job, it comes to a point where I think, wait, what do I do for work anymore? What do I even do if I take a couple of days off? So then Monday, I actually definitely had a more slower get back into the groove day. But I find because you and I both work for ourselves, why are we so hard on ourselves when we have a day like that where we're just like, because if we worked a typical 9 to 5, that Monday or Tuesday back after a long weekend, usually you're just chatting to your coworkers and answering a few emails and it's not a huge productive day. But when we work for ourselves, we really beat ourselves up over that.
Right. It's amazing when you do work for yourself, how much pressure you put on yourself. I've been learning a lot over the last couple of years to just be like, it's okay. I don't have to be working at full capacity all the time because that's not realistic. And I'm trying to get better at it. But now that you've said that out loud, like I think I've been away from Wednesday to Sunday. That's a lot of time off. It's not going to be like straight back into it. So that's probably why.
Yeah. And especially like a normal week, if you take a full weekend off or a long weekend, that first day back, it's kind of like life admin. You're doing laundry, you're organizing your house, you're just doing adulting things.
Basically everything I did yesterday. I did all of my clothes washing and just tidied up the house, did all that sort of stuff. So I guess it was productive in that sense.
But it's interesting. The first thought that you have is, oh my God, I haven't accomplished anything. I haven't been productive. Now, all of a sudden, I feel like the week has gone to waste because I've had one day off. It's crazy. Yeah. We let ourselves spiral.
Yeah, it's weird. And I've just had this weird underlying like discomfort all day. And I'm like, nothing is wrong. Like everything is fine. But I'm just like, I should be doing something else. I don't know. It's bugging me a little bit, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Honestly, like I find when I have days like that, I just look at my to-do list or just like anything that I need to get done and just pick one thing. And as long as I get that one thing done, I don't worry about the rest because I feel like I got something done. And it could be as simple as get all the laundry done or reorganize something that I've been putting off or just, okay, I want to get this email newsletter out. I have 10 other things I also want to accomplish today, but let's just get one of them done. So I don't feel like the day is a total waste.
Yeah. My coach and I went through that a couple of years ago, actually, during like the really bad lockdowns. He was like, just do one thing. It does not matter. And it completely changed my mindset around that pressure to get things done when you just are like, I have to do one thing. And then funnily enough, when you do one thing, you're like, oh, I could do another one now. And then you actually get more things done than sitting there procrastinating, stressing that you can't do anything or you can't do it all. So,
And procrastination is often linked to self-sabotage, which I find a very interesting concept.
yes.
And I can resonate with that a lot. So, yep, I feel you. Obviously, we just talked about like an ebb or something that's been bugging you or setting you back lately, but where have you had some wins lately in your life in the last few weeks?
Well, up until the last 2 days, for the last month or so, I have been extremely motivated. And I talked about this in the last video that I uploaded, actually. It's just interesting how 6 months ago at the beginning of the year, I was completely demotivated. And I think in hindsight, it was probably because we didn't really know what was going to happen in 2022. It was like, are we going to be locked down? Are we going to be back out in the world? So it was really hard to set goals this year or have an idea of what would happen. And then recently, being able to travel and go to Europe, when I came back, I was like, okay, I feel a little more normal now. I'm not sure what it's like for everybody else, but in, I guess, my little world, things are starting to feel more normal. And I realized I had this boost of motivation and almost this excitement and inspiration for whatever the next 6 months or the remainder of the year holds. And I ran with it. I just started trying new things across all of my social media platforms. I started uploading reels and TikToks. And then I started trying a new format on my YouTube channel of going live with my audience instead of, pre-filming, editing, and uploading. And I did 3 weeks of trying basically 3 different things. And I saw success in every single area. And I was so surprised. I did not expect to see results that quickly. And I was like, whoa, this is really, really cool to see, especially after a couple of years of things just sort of flatlining a little bit and not really seeing any growth in my workspace. So yeah, it was very cool. Very cool. So
it must be tough being a content creator and having everything so planned out where you're posting twice a week and you have this rhythm and this schedule, then all of a sudden the platforms change or people's attention span changes or the content style changes, and knowing how to pivot, but still kind of giving your audience the same kind of content and style that they want. I know you and I have talked about that a lot. And I feel like a lot of your demotivation and like lack of inspiration came from those constant changing platforms. So if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so I've been making YouTube videos it's 11 years this year. It's wild.
Insane.
I started, I think, in 2011 and it's now 2022. So 11 years. And I have seen the platform change a lot in the last 11 years, but it's long format content and it's vertical, horizontal, and I am so used to it. And I realized in the last 6 months that particularly with TikTok and Instagram and Reels and whatnot, it's all switching to short format content, really snappy, really fast, 5-second videos, and it's all vertical. And I haven't built up the habit of filming in that format yet. I'm still so used to making really long content. And so in the last month or so, I've had to start experimenting and getting out of my comfort zone and trying to keep up. And it's stressful, and learning anything new always isn't particularly easy, but at the same time it's been really fun to see how I've picked it up and the way that I view short format content now.
Do you find a lot of YouTubers that you keep in contact with felt similarly?
Basically all of them.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends are YouTubers. Some of them have been doing it for as long as I have. And it's interesting seeing their journey as well, where maybe they've dropped off on YouTube. One of my friends back in Australia, she's sort of dropped off on YouTube and she's now recently started picking up this is me as a mum and this is my mum body. And now I'm dressing for my mum body. And she's just blowing up on Instagram and has all this great fashion advice. And it was just completely different to where she was when she started. And it's interesting seeing the changes between the platforms and how things grow over the years.
The one thing that I found, even I'm not a content creator by any means, but I found hard to get used to, and I still do, is the lack of curation that comes with the TikTok and IG Reels now. I'm used to having a really curated feed, and I still want to. And I know you and I have talked about this as well, where you want to be putting out content quicker because people's attention spans are so much less. Yes. But I find I feel like people aren't planning content as much as before. And I don't even know how to adapt to that.
Yeah. I mean, I tried it. 2-3 weeks ago, I tried it. I think 4 days in a row. I just kept trying to throw up anything. And then I came to your place and we were doing like that YouTube session. And then we made smoothies and you were like, do you want a ring light? Do you want all these things? And I was like, no, we're just going to try. And I was so uncomfortable filming that because I was like, oh, the kitchen counter isn't perfect or it's not all framed properly. But when I cut it together in really, really short clips and only needed like, 0.2 of a second of something, it actually became a really cool reel and it blew up. And I think it got to like 30,000 views
like
in like 10,
almost.
it was like in 10 minutes. I mean, you were in the bathroom and just like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? And I don't know, like that's really hard to get used to, that it doesn't have to be beautiful and it doesn't have to look perfect, because I think you're probably the same as me. When you've done it so long, for like so many years, it's ingrained in you to make content a certain way. And now you're like, I have to change my habits and it's uncomfortable and I don't like it. But the only way to do it is to just force yourself through it. And eventually it'll get easier and you become more comfortable with it. And I think that's probably why I've avoided making anything like that for about a week now, because I've sort of slipped back into that. I don't want to do it. It's not comfortable. I don't want to do it.
I know. I'm adapting as well. And I'm watching so many other realtors post content so frequently. And I'm like, shit, well, I didn't do my hair perfectly enough today. I'm kind of wearing a more casual outfit. I'm not in a full suit. Like, I don't really want to be creating content. But then I see other realtors' content. I'm like, no. Like, you just have to film what you normally look like. Like today, when I go out on showings, I'm wearing jeans and I'll throw on a blazer and my hair is up. It's like, why can't I create content looking like that? Because when my clients meet me, that's probably what I'm going to look like. I'm not going to look perfectly blown out hair. Yep. So the way I see it is people want to see you showing up as the real you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard.
Really hard. It's hard. The thing is if you have an attention to detail like we do,
both of us
so used to picking out all these small things like, oh, my hair's not quite right or whatever. No one else would notice it. Not one other person would look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's terrible. Like I notice that when I look at other people's beautifully curated content and I'm like, I would never sit here and pick this apart. So no one is doing that to my content. And I have noticed that particularly also doing my YouTube lives where it's very informal. I don't get to edit. I don't have to show anything. I'm just sitting and having a conversation because there's the chat box. It's very uncomfortable to be that vulnerable and just show up as you are, but it's just so much better.
What's the feedback from your YouTube followers on the new YouTube lives?
I am so surprised. Like, honestly, so surprised. I actually cried in my last live stream.
But why? What's the feedback and what's the change?
Because I was having a conversation with them about how I've been doing this for so long and it's lonely. I feel like I'm sitting on one side of the camera and it's a one-way conversation and I don't really know anything about my followers. And I want to open up that dialogue, which is why I like doing lives, so that I feel like I can sit down and have a conversation and get to know my audience. And it's a two-way relationship. And I have had a fantastic response to it. Everybody absolutely loves it. I haven't felt this supported, I think, in a really long time. And it's because I did get vulnerable and I got emotional about it. And it was just a beautiful response. People have been messaging me all week now, like, are you going live this week? When's the next one? I'm like, what are you talking about? I had a lot of DMs on Instagram afterwards of people sharing their thoughts and their feelings. And it was all really lovely and beautiful. And that's just like the more personal feedback. If I look into my analytics and the stats on these videos, I'm very surprised. They have not quite as many views as a normal video, but they're really up there. The live that I did last week has brought in about 300 new followers this week, which is huge. The most growth I've seen on YouTube in like 4 years. Usually I'm losing subscribers. So that's like I was like, what is happening? Like, it's great. Everything's doing really, really well. And I want to keep going down that path because it makes me feel more fulfilled being able to have that two-way conversation.
Do you think it's because they feel like they're actually getting to know you?
I think so. And I think it's because I'm actually getting to know them as well. And yeah, I had a DM that I read this morning on Instagram where they were like, I really appreciate you saying all of that because I felt like I was on FaceTime to a friend. And I was like, me too. I know that you guys are
Yeah.
just a chat box and I'm not talking to a face like I am right now in this, like, podcast, but it's just, I feel like I'm just texting my friends or just chatting, and it's so cool. And I love it. I love that sort of deeper connection.
Mm-hmm. And it also gives you things to talk about. I'm sure being a content creator, you run out of ideas. You're like, what do people really want to know? What do I want to see? And even with me working in real estate, because I'm in it all day long, I assume this is well-known knowledge. And then when someone asks me a question just every day, and I'm like, oh, you guys don't know that? And I'm like, oh, that's a content idea. And so when people are live in the chat box with you during a YouTube live, you're getting instant ideas. And so I'm sure if you see people asking a similar question 5-10 times, now you're like, oh, maybe I'll dive deeper on this in a full video.
Yeah, that's exactly sort of what's happened. I've only done I've done technically 3 live streams in the last month, but one of them, no, actually, I think I did one of them before I went away. So it's been a while and I had technical difficulties. I couldn't keep it up on my channel. And so now I've only done 2 that are still up on my channel that people can go back and watch. And I was really, really nervous about it because I'm so used to coming up with a storyboard in my head and having an idea of what I'm going to talk about and the content. But for these lives, I have a rough topic and then it just, I don't know, turns and morphs into other things, because that's what happens when you have a conversation with someone. You don't show up to a conversation and just talk about one thing. It changes into other things. And that's what's happened with, my audience like talking back to me, and it's really cool. And so then I'm now at this really cool position where I'm like, oh, I love this. I get to talk about all kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be what my content has usually been about. We can always tie it back into that organization or motivation or whatever, but I get to learn more about other people. People give me really good ideas, and I like that. It's making all my creative juices in my brain flow a little bit better.
And it re-inspires you again. It brings back a whole new wave of, oh yeah, this is why I do this. I love it. And I'm energized about it again and excited.
I am. And this is, I like I said, I've just been so motivated lately. I think it's all just kind of, I don't know, mid-year, the right time, everything's coming together. And I'm just like, yes, let's like see what the rest of 2022 has to offer.
I want to chit chat about relationships and mental health and just the roller coaster that you've been through not even since I've known you, even like the last few months. Like it's nuts how much your mindset about everything has changed, like the ups and downs and the constant changes. Like I've seen every version of a mindset with you in relationships in the past like 6 months.
Probably.
But I love it.
I'm like my coach tells me that sometimes I work a little too hard. I'm like, I love problem solving. And when it comes to my own like mental health and trying to understand myself, I'm like, ooh, what does this mean? What's next? What else can I figure out about myself? How can I change the way that I look at things? And I push a little too much ahead sometimes, and I need to just take it back. But
one thing that I've learned a lot and have taken from you a lot lately that I've been kind of integrating into my life is I feel like both of us are a lot more open to the gray of relationships. Yes. And I think we both used to see it as very black and white. And when someone hurt us, or when the connection wasn't there anymore, or we weren't exclusive anymore, immediately removing them from our life. And like, that's it, burning that bridge. But I feel like one thing that you've been through in the past few months is being a little bit more open to the gray of a relationship. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because almost 2 years ago, I had a conversation with my therapist, and he was like, do you think you could be okay with the unknown? Do you think you can learn to be okay in the gray? And at the time I was like, absolutely not. It needs to be like door open or door closed. Like I have to have answers. And now I look back being like, oh my God, that is so much growth. That is so much progress. And that's the thing with self-development and working on your mental health. It takes time. It's been almost 2 years for me to fully understand the concept that we started talking about. And it's hard and it's complicated and it's messy, but I'm starting to understand this gray area. And I don't necessarily think it's just in regards to relationships. It's actually across all areas of my life. And it's this almost belief that I'm like, everything is exactly as it should be in this moment, and whatever's for me will come. I don't need to keep worrying about the future. And it's funny because, 2 years ago, I would have been so anxious and stressed about the idea of being in the gray. But now that I'm learning to be okay with it, it's the complete opposite. It actually eases the anxiety because I'm no longer thinking about the future. I'm thinking about what I have right now and what's going on in this moment, and just setting all the other things off to the sides. And it's amazing. So yeah, it's still getting used to it, but not everything has to be black and white.
Mm-hmm. I find as women, especially, and we can often feel like we are on a timeline and like a ticking clock. And it's funny, I personally don't always feel like that, but I've had even men say to me, well, like you have a bit of a ticking time clock. And the fact that they have said that to me, I'm like, I guess that's a social, well-known thing in society.
Yeah.
And I know that you dealt with that difficulty of worrying about the timeline and running out of time, but you don't worry about that anymore. So what's changed?
No. So it's interesting because up until I was 29, the idea of getting married and having babies, I was like, maybe it'll never happen. I don't really care if it does. I've got plenty of time. I've got all the time in the world. And then it just changed. I'm wondering if it had to do with the pandemic and, the being alone all the time during the pandemic was really difficult. So all of a sudden I switched and I was like, I want to get married and have babies. And at the time that I turned 31, I was like, oh my God, like I've got to find someone. And it was like I tunnel visioned into this is what I need. And then I don't really know what happened. I think it was just, I went back to Australia for a month and then I was back here for a month. And I am very big on like, whatever I'm afraid of, I'm going to do it. And I had the opportunity to be in a bit of a gray area with someone. And my initial instinct was to absolutely not do that. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. And I am so surprised at how comfortable and easy it is with the unknown. And then something sort of changed. And I realized that if I want to get married and have babies, it'll happen. And it'll happen when it's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too. And I don't know how to really explain it, but I just somehow became really, really present. And I was like, my life is amazing. I have so many great things happening in my life. And I have been almost ignoring all of them because there was this one thing that was missing. And now it's the complete opposite. And I'm like, oh, I actually don't care if that thing ever comes because I am, when they say in manifesting and you got to focus on the abundance, that happened. It was like a switch. And all of a sudden I'm like, my life is so full. I am so fulfilled. I have so many great things. If that adds to it, cool. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's kind of future Rachel's problem. And I'm not going to be stressing about it. And I think too, I've learned that I don't know if I want to be bringing that into my life from a place of like, oh, I have to have this. I think I want to be bringing it into my life from a place of, well, this is nice. This is a nice addition.
What you've eventually realized is what all of us were seeing for so long. Like we were watching you say like, oh, like my life isn't complete without X, Y, and Z, without completing these life stages. And I remember, I can speak to myself. I remember sitting around and be like, man, this girl has a sweet life, like cool life. Like she works for herself. She has a lot of great friends. Yeah. Like she's living in a different country. She can travel wherever she wants, whenever she wants. Why is she so caught up in this one thing? Like it'll come when it comes. But it doesn't matter. We can say that to you 1,000 times and it's never going to sink in. So what ends up switching internally where then you finally see yourself how we see you?
Well, it's amazing what trauma does to your mind. I was in a not so great relationship many, many, many years ago now. And 5 to 7 years later, I'm still dealing with the effects of it. And if you don't deal with it, it's going to dictate how you move forward in your life, which is why a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm going to go and see a therapist. So a few months ago, I was just digging through a really deep trauma. And it was coming out in that form of tunnel vision. And until I sifted through it and understood it better and actually processed it and worked through it, that change was never going to come. So I'm really big on facing I don't know if you've ever heard of an author called Brené Brown, but
Of course, girl,
I
I'm like
love
a
her.
self-help guru.
Yeah. So I read one of her books 2.5 years ago and it completely changed my life.
Which one?
I can't remember it, but I do have it behind me. The Gifts of Imperfection.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that when I was wondering if that
one.
was it.
I read that just before or just as I actually moved to Canada for the first time. And it made me realize that I think she says, you have to, in her TED talk, you have to face the things that you're ashamed of. So that's when I sought out a therapist and I was like, all right, let's get to work. And it was painful and messy and complicated. And in hindsight, I cringe at my thought patterns and my thought processes. But that all came from unresolved trauma, and that's not my fault. It's not my fault that I thought about things that way. And it's my fault if I decided to ignore it and carry on with it. But I decided to really dig through it. And it's been like almost like a release. I feel free, honestly. That's how I feel after digging through some of that like deeper trauma. So I think that is probably the main reason as to why my mindset has changed a lot in the last, I want to say probably 2 months, month and a half. It's really, really shifted. It's because I finally just got through the last little hurdle of some deep trauma from a few years ago.
What makes you finally realize like, maybe the problem is me. Maybe the problem is my mindset and the way I'm viewing things. Maybe there's some trauma that I still need to work towards. How do you wake up one day and realize like, okay, I have to go sort my own shit out?
In 2019, I was in a relationship and we'd been together for a couple of years and it was a lovely relationship. But when that relationship ended, it was like just a huge wake up call. I was like, because for the last few months of that relationship, I felt like I was cracking. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's basically, I kind of ended up as a bit of a people pleaser. It wasn't just romantic relationships. It was everything. It was my job. I was showing up online to what I thought my audience wanted me to be. I was being the friend that I thought my friends wanted. I was being the girlfriend that I thought my boyfriend wanted. And you can only do that for so long. And in 2019, I just started to crack. I couldn't do it anymore. And I remember at one point, this was before we broke up, that I actually kind of logged out of all of my accounts, didn't really talk to anyone for a few days. And I sat on my living room floor and I was like, who am I? Like, what do I like? What makes me me? And I started making this little vision board and just spent a couple of days to myself. And then from there, I noticed that I started to get a little bit more comfortable and things started to shift. I wasn't as anxious all the time. Then the relationship ended. And that was just like, as I said, a huge wake up call. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. I am not going to have no voice. I am not going to stop expressing myself and my needs across all my relationships because it's not healthy. And so then I sought out a therapist and I've been working with him ever since. And it's completely changed my life. I was able to find a sense of self and get my voice back and stop those people-pleasing tendencies.
I mean, I dated someone recently where I felt the exact same, where I felt that I couldn't speak up or I couldn't really be who I really am. And I just couldn't be myself. So I get how you were feeling. And you were in a long relationship doing that. Mine was very short-lived. Yeah. And I know how much healing I need to do just from that. So I can only imagine how much healing you need to do in a long-term relationship. Yeah, it's insane. And we almost lose our voice and actually forget who we are. And then we almost screw ourselves over even more because then we're actually acting not even as the person who they were attracted to in the beginning. And we lose both ways.
Yeah, we lose both ways. It's interesting because it's all interconnected is what I'm learning. It's not just like if you have trauma in one area of your life, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's friendships, maybe it's childhood, that trickles into every area of your life and how you approach everything. And it's interesting because I said that at the time I was being what my audience wanted me to be kind of thing. I would try to cater to them and not really show up as myself. And that was actually 3 years ago. And it's now just 3 years later that I'm starting to find my voice back on my social media and show up more of myself, which is why I started doing those lives. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time, which is the hard thing. You have to learn patience. And I'm not a patient person and I've had to learn it.
Well, lack of patience often comes with high ambition.
Yeah.
You can't just sit and let it flow naturally.
No,
It's very hard.
You can't. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you another question about when you said the tunnel vision.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. So basically you're kind of linking, did you say you're linking the trauma to like having tunnel vision?
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. So talk more about that.
So it's interesting because
You're almost blocking out all the trauma, right?
Yeah, because it's so painful. And everybody has some kind of trauma. We all have things that we're, like, as Brené Brown says, shame. We all have things that we're ashamed of. And when you keep suppressing it and pushing it away, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you. But it's painful. The most painful thing that I've ever had to do in my life was go to therapy and actually start digging in and figuring out who I was. And then you realize, yeah, I don't really like myself. And that's a really hard realization.
And then how do you expect other people to like you?
Yeah. And so I feel that when I'm actively working through something and it's very, very painful, it's like it's got to come out somewhere. And then I think that's how I get a bit tunnel visioned. Whereas I feel very balanced and very zen and aligned right now. So I feel like my mind is completely open. But yeah, when I'm hurting, it's like you hyper focus on something to try to fix it, but that's not really going to fix it. It's the digging deep and seeing my therapist and working on it and putting myself into uncomfortable situations to relearn habits and relearn things. And that all just takes time. And I've actually sort of become much more observant of the people around me, the way that they interact and respond to things. And I'm also a little more observant of social media too. I try not to do this that much because it means I'm taking on a lot of other people's energy, but I do like to go and read the comment sections on certain videos to see how people are responding to this video. And it's really interesting because you can see it in the people who are so adamant about something that they're like, this is how it is and there's no other option. That to me is the tunnel vision, and there's trauma under there and it's not being dealt with.
Give me an example of one of those comments.
So interestingly, today I came across this video of this young 20-year-old couple. And
okay, so not your video, someone else's video.
No, this wasn't my video. This was someone else's. And she's packing up a box. This was a TikTok video. And essentially she's realized that, I'm young and I have a lot of learning and growing to do and I'm moving out.
Wait, is that the TikTok of the couple that they're staying together, but they're getting separate places?
I think so. And I had to read the comments.
I saw this. Oh, I read some of the comments too.
I actually found it really interesting because there were a lot of people who were like, you know what, we did this. This was the best thing for our relationship. And there were so many comments that I personally feel were projecting. It's like, you're going to break up. That's it. It's over. This is not going to work. And I realized all those people who are so adamant that they know how this relationship is going have some trauma, some issues and things that they've not worked through. Because I think once you've worked through it, you can sit there and be like, everybody else is on a journey and my experiences don't dictate someone else's future. That was just this morning. I was just reading through these comments and I just realized that's that tunnel vision. It's like, this happened to me, so now it's going to happen to me again and it's going to happen to everybody else. That's not how it works. If you address that and you work through it, you become more open to what's out there. And you can see in all the other people that were a little more understanding that they were just like, maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but this is what I need right now. And that's okay. That comes back to that gray area. There is no black and white. There is no right and wrong in relationships. And this was something my therapist said to me when we first started working together. He said, we all have a concept of the way the world works. It comes from our childhood and our parents, and then also our adult relationships. And he gave a really simple example being like, you understand what a chair is. You see a chair, you know how to use it, you have a concept of what a chair is. The same for relationships. We all have an idea of what relationships are based on our experiences and our learning. But if you hadn't had any relationships, anything at all, and it was completely new to you, you could make a relationship whatever you want. You get to decide what a relationship is. So for these two young kids, if right now she needs to go out and live on her own, that doesn't dictate that that's going to be a disaster and it's not going to work out. It's up to them. And it was just very interesting seeing everybody in those comments project their personal experiences onto that young couple. And I felt quite bad for them. I was like, I don't think it's appropriate to go rating on these kids' parade. If it doesn't work out, that's fine, but let them do their thing.
It just goes to show how much pressure there is on people that create content and are vulnerable and willing to put their lives out on the internet for everyone else to make comments about. And it's always the people that make the harshest comments that would never put themselves in front of a camera. Never. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, there was a couple people on that who'd written something not encouraging, and it was quite negative. And someone was like, they didn't ask for your opinion. And this person's response to that was, well, if they didn't want my opinion, they shouldn't have put it on the internet. And I was like, the entitlement.
Yeah.
To think that you have the right to go around and just say whatever you're thinking and feeling. And I did talk about this in my last live, where the internet is hard. It's hard to show up and be vulnerable because it's not a safe space. And I'm trying to create a safe space on my platform. And for the most part, I'm very fortunate. My audience is amazing. They're all very kind, gentle people. Yeah, there are a few people. There's one person who's been around for a long time, and I take a lot of what they say with a grain of salt. And, you know, she got a bit mad at me last week, being like, well, if I don't like it, then I should just quit. And I put myself online, so what else do I expect? And then she said, I want to have a conversation with you, but you'll just tell me I'm wrong. And I did respond, and I said, look, you're not wrong, but I want to know what you get out of being rude. And someone else commented and was like, this is the exact example of what we were talking about on the live. And then this person never responded. So I'm trying to understand that thought process and the way that sometimes people behave online. I don't get it. But I am willing to listen, and I would love it if someone would come and have a conversation with me about why they think that their opinions
matter.
that they're free to throw around their opinions like that. So I'm curious.
It's the entitlement all the time.
Yeah, I want to know.
It drives me nuts.
I find it fascinating. I'm very curious to see the thought process behind why people comment the things that they do sometimes.
Yeah, as I get older, two-pronged thought process right here, right now. As I get older, I definitely see how relationships can be, again, like you said, whatever you want them to be. It doesn't have to be as black and white and as traditional as you've seen before, because we've seen many examples that doesn't work. I see the importance of just having a connection with someone and seeing wherever that takes you without any of the traditional expectations on top of it. And then secondly, my thought process around, when people make those comments, you're right. There's so much projection, but it just goes to show, I love how we saw both ends of the needle of comments on that video, where so many people were like, yeah, we did that and it worked for us, and we're very happily married together now. And then other people, because they've had a bad experience doing that, like you said, they think that's the way it is. And I would challenge people, if you've had a different experience than someone else, sure, you can let them know, yeah, me and my partner tried that. It didn't work for us, but I'm hoping it works for you. You can give a different opinion and different perspective, but if you're able to leave the comment and leave the conversation with a little bit more encouragement, I just think that would be better for everyone. You know?
I completely agree. I think I actually learned something about myself last week. One of my friends came to me and he wanted to show me something. And he's like, I wasn't sure if I should show you because I thought maybe you would judge me. I am like a judgment-free zone, especially with all of the work that I've done. I've come to learn and understand that I have all the answers within myself, and I don't really seek out a lot of advice anymore. So I don't really feel like I need to be giving advice unless someone does ask me for it. He wasn't asking me for advice. He just wanted to show me something that he was planning on doing. And he's like, I thought you might judge me. And I was like, absolutely not. I said lightheartedly, was like, worst case scenario. And he's like, exactly. And I'm like, if you're okay with the worst case scenario and figuring it out, who am I to judge? If that's what you want to do, you do that. I realized that, I'm not going to be the friend that's going to be coming and giving advice. I'm going to be here to just support you through your journey, because sometimes you have to figure things out for yourself, unless someone really, really wants my opinion. And even then, I'm probably not really going to give it because I don't think my opinion matters. You're going to figure it out. You're going to go through life and do what you got to do. And being human is making mistakes, and then you learn from those mistakes. So I don't want to, discourage people from figuring it out, because even if it turns out to be a disaster, they're going to be fine. They're going to get through it. They're going to learn something, and they're going to grow from it.
Last question, and a little topic that I want to touch on is angel numbers and manifestation, all the abundance that you have absolutely been seeing, and now I'm starting to see. So if anyone's not familiar with angel numbers, it's when you start seeing like 1111 all the time, or 1234, 1111, 2222. And I know, Rachel, when you went to Greece, or when you came back to Greece around that time, or right before you went, you were seeing the angel numbers over and over and over again. And you just saw a lot of things kind of change, and the ebbs in your life and the changes. Yeah. And now I've been seeing them constantly the last couple of weeks. So I want you to kind of tell the audience quickly kind of what happened and the changes, and like how some of the angel numbers showed up in your life.
Yeah. So for a long time now, I've understood the concept of the universe or a higher power, and it, guiding you and giving you signs of things. It is one of those things that sometimes I'm a little bit like, is it real? Is it not real? But I do understand it. And there are times where just all of a sudden you just can't stop seeing certain things. And it might not just be numbers. It might even be like particular motives or names, or you hear things constantly. I remember back just as I was in the process of moving to Canada for the very, very first time, all of a sudden, everything was like, I saw billboards on trams in Melbourne for traveling Canada, like Canadian tourism. I'm listening to the songs, and like Toronto's mentioned in a song. And I'm like, what is happening? Like the world is screaming Canada at me. And you could take that as a sign being like, you're on the right track. Like you're going to Canada. You're on the right track. So when I was in Greece, it sort of started, and I kept seeing a lot of the repetitive numbers. They all have different meanings. You can Google them and you get different, like the ones, the twos, threes, they all mean different things. And usually it's always ones or twos. Well, actually for me, it's usually ones or threes. But
you were getting the fives.
I was getting fives. I was getting nothing but fives, which signifies major change coming. And then I also have that pattern app, which gives you like pattern things. And then apparently the pattern that started on the 1st of June was major change. Like apparently I'm going through this big major change thing. And it's just funny because there was that complete shift to feeling very balanced and aligned and just feeling very content. And then I remember I was going out for dinner with you and Liz, and I think it was the first time seeing you guys since I got back, and it was just getting out of hand. Like I looked down at my watch and it was 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, like 5 fives or something. And I was like, I get it, universe, change is coming. I get it. And then like 4 days later, boy, did I get change. And I was waiting for it. And I laughed. It was like I had to laugh. I was like, I shall never doubt the universe ever again. Like it was
that was
wild.
A bit of like an uproar.
Yeah. And it's like coincidence, or like what is happening? So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I got to believe a little bit more, because it was wild.
You were ready to uproot your life.
Yeah. I was like, what is happening? And
like in 24, 48 hours, it all changed again.
It all changed. Everything just completely switched. And that was a few weeks ago. And the change since has been fabulous. Like it was a difficult change, but the difficulty only lasted for about 4 or 5 days. And then I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like actually everything's so much better with this change. So I don't know. These things happen.
I know. So last question for you before I let you go. What changes do you expect to come soon, or that you welcome into your life, or some changes that maybe you want to happen?
I'm hoping that there's a shift in my content on my channel to being able to do more live streams and having that more relaxed, casual conversation. Always unsettling to try new things, particularly on a platform like YouTube, where not that anyone really understands the algorithm, but there are certain things that I do know that you have to be very careful about the type of content you put out. Otherwise, YouTube will be like, we're going to squash and just kill your entire channel. So I don't know, you like standing on a rock and you're like, I got to test this rock a little bit. I got to test this one. And then you take a step, and it's very overwhelming, but so far it's going really well. And I'm hoping that people enjoy that type of content. And then I get to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more myself, and yeah, so I'm hoping that it goes well.
And that's a lot less pressure on you, a lot less curation, a lot less time. So everyone wins.
I know. And then I have more time freed up to work on other things, which I'm really excited about. So,
and what are they, if you want to tell everyone?
This week, I'm actually working on some new planners. Hopefully they'll be up on my website in a couple of weeks once they get manufactured. I've designed one and I'm in the process of finishing off the other, and I got to get them all sent away, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, these are so cute. And I'll make sure to add the links to your website and your planners and obviously your YouTube, Instagram, everything in the show notes. Last but not least, Rachel, any last bit of advice that you want to leave the audience with when you think back to everything that you've been through in the last, let's say, year, the ebbs and the flows and how you've come out better than before? What do you want to leave the audience with?
I know it's not fun, and it's painful, and it's messy, and it's complicated. And in some circumstances, it can be very expensive, but it is worth the financial and emotional investment to get help, to speak to a therapist and dig into the things that may be like really limiting you and keeping you tunnel visioned and stopping you from progressing to where you actually want to be.
As if I needed another reminder. Oh my goodness. I know I had to. Honestly, every time someone talks about tunnel vision or working a lot, it's probably a trauma response. I'm like, I know, just let me keep doing this the way I want to.
Oh, also, actually, there's another little bit of advice. As magical as social media is providing us all with sort of an eye opener into what healthy habits and relationships and communication looks like, there's also a lot of really toxic content out there. And I've had to check myself a lot in the last 6 months to a year to be like, this actually doesn't apply to my situation. This does not apply to the relationships that I have. I shouldn't be listening to this. So be careful. I think there's one account that I think is fabulous on Instagram, which is called Create the Love. That one's a safe bet. Mm-hmm. That's got all the good advice. So yeah.
Mark Groves, right?
Yeah, he is. He's great.
I know him. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. I love having my friends on because the conversations are just so easy and fun. And I know, given that this is the space that you're in anyways on video, I knew you'd be a joy to chat to. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Did you know that I'm not only a podcast host, but in my full-time career, I am a Toronto-based real estate agent. In 2021, I closed 100 deals. Yes, you heard that correctly, 100. So if you or someone you know is a busy professional looking to get into the Toronto real estate market and looking to work with a realtor who values your time, make sure to reach out to me and let's get connected. And in the meantime, we'll see you here back next week.